ladies, and welcome to Coding for Kids. Today, we are going to be talking about the CSS Box Model. So what is the CSS Box Model? And we're just going to be looking at the CSS Box Model and what it is, because this might seem very strange to all of you guys. So let's just jump right in. So first, let's look at the overview of this video. So this video actually has two parts to it. So part one, you can kind of think of this as more of like just understanding what the box model is, because the CSS box model, first you need to understand what it is, and you kind of need to understand what we're talking about. And then in part two, we're going to be doing some coding. So we're going to be looking at some properties, and we're going to be looking at how to build this CSS box model. So there are two different parts. You can think of part one as like just understanding the box model, and then part two as like actually coding it and experimenting with it. So first, what is the CSS box model? What does it mean by box model? So all the elements in HTML can be considered boxes. For example, let's say you have a HTML heading. You can consider it as a box. So when we use the term box model in CSS, it means we are talking about the design or layout of an element. The CSS box model is basically an imaginary box. So for example, let's say this is my web page. This is my web page. First, we have our H1 heading. So what is the CSS box model? And you can think of it as like a box. There's a box around every HTML element. It could be an image, it could be a paragraph, it could be a heading, but you could just think of it like there's a box around everything. So this box wraps around every HTML element, forms, tables, etc. It includes margin, borders, padding, and the actual content. So now let's look at how you can actually think of the box model. So first we have our content. So for example, this would be our heading, this would be our image, this would be our paragraph, whatever. Then we have padding right around the content. And then we have a border and then a margin. And you can kind of see the directions. We have our top, our bottom, our left, and our right. So it would be like top margin, top padding, bottom padding, whatever. And you can also see that the content's width and height. So I feel like this is a really useful diagram to just like kind of refer to. But now we're going to be talking about, I guess you could say, the different parts in a CSS box model. So first, our content, I already talked about it. This is where you see like images and text and stuff. Then the padding. It defines the space between the element's content and the element's border. And the padding is invisible. So if I go back to the box model diagram, you can see that here is our border and then here is our content. So the padding is how much space you want in between these two. So if you wanted neck and neck, you could say 0 padding or something. But if you want a little bit of space, you can maybe say 20 pixels, 30 pixels, etc. How much space you want between them. Then our border, it goes around the padding and the content. Again, this is something you see. It's just like a little line or whatever design you choose, but the border. Then we have finally the margin. So this defines the space around elements. So for example, even though our border is right here, let's say, our when you add your margin, nothing can go in that space. For example, if this is how big your margin is, that means your elements can only be in this area. It can't go inside of here because even though it's invisible, it's still part of your HTML element. So no HTML elements can go inside of your margin. It's just basically adding a little bit of space around your element. And this is also invisible. So your padding and your margin are invisible, and then the content and the border are invisible. So with that aside, now let's look at calculating the width and the height of an element. So coding is basically math. You can think of it as another form of math. So when you're coding, you will see a good amount of math when coding. So So why is calculating the width and the height of an element important? Why do you need to do this? Well, for example, let's say you want to add a cool little design on your web page, and you need to look at the width or the height to determine how big that needs to be. You can calculate the width and the height of an element and determine how big it is. And you can kind of determine its whole area in that web page. So first, let's look at the total width. So this is usually the most common one. You don't really usually need to calculate the height, but the width is the more important one. But still, we'll look at the height. So for this, you're gonna need to add the original width. Then you're gonna, and the total element width is not just the elements width, because then you have padding, and then you also have margins and stuff like that. Because don't forget, margins and paddings are still there. Even if you can't see them, they're still there, and they still add space to your elements, so you still need to count them. So first we have just the elements width, I guess. Then you have your left padding, your right padding, your left border, your right border. So basically on both sides. And again, like width is this way, just FYI. So first you have your width, then you have your left padding, then you have your right padding, then you have the left border, then you have the right border, and then you have the left margin and the right margin. So looking at this, you need to add the padding, the border, and the margin. Even though technically it's not really part of the element, you're still adding that, so you still need to calculate it or use it for your width. And for height, it's very, very similar. First, you would add the actual elements height. Then instead of left and right, it would be the top padding, the bottom padding, the top border, the bottom border, the top margin, and the bottom margin. So you can think of width as left and right, and you would add all of the left and right, values, I guess. And then for height, it would be top and bottom. So again, just FYI, width is this way, and then height is like this. So again, just because you can't really see the padding, or you can't really see the border, you can see the border, but just because you can't see the padding or the margin doesn't mean they're not part of your element, because it's like imaginary space you're giving to your element. So now with this aside, we're just going to do a little quick review, and then we're going to end the video. So what did we do today? So we looked at the CSS box model, and we looked at what it was. Then we looked at a visual and kind of, how we can interpret the box model. Then we looked at the different parts of the CSS box model, and we kind of learned about, what is what. And then we learned about calculating the width and the height of an element. And then in part 2, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing lots of coding. We're going to be looking at the padding property, and how to write that. Also the border property and the margin property. So, how can we actually, set this box model? How can we add padding? How can we add border? How can we add margin? Now we're going to be, kind of doing some coding and, exploring around with all these properties. So guys, that was it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share the video with all your friends and family so they can also learn some coding as well. So thanks for watching Coding for Kids, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys!